Have you ever tried negotiating a high-stakes deal where both sides completely distrust each other? And, someone is literally threatening to blow up the building if the paperwork doesn't get signed.
Oh, wow. I mean, that goes so far beyond a typical pressure tactic when the threat involves, literal destruction.
Right.
You are no longer in a negotiation. At that point, you're basically in a hostage situation where the psychology of both parties just fundamentally warps, and logic usually goes right out the window.
Exactly. Well, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to really unpack an incredibly volatile geopolitical standoff playing out right now between the United States and Iran.
Yeah, and we're drawing directly from a recent Fox News broadcast transcript for this.
We are. We're going to decode this chaotic combination of, stalled diplomacy, extreme political rhetoric, and literal physical naval combat. But before we jump in, a quick note to you, our listener.
Right, very important.
We are analyzing some highly charged political and military events today. We aren't taking sides, and we aren't endorsing any of the viewpoints, ultimatums, or actions we're about to discuss. Our goal is strictly to report and decode the factual claims and quotes from our source material, so you can actually understand the mechanics of this standoff.
And I mean, the mechanics are what make this situation so complex. We really have to separate the underlying strategies and the historical context from, just the noise of the daily news cycle.
Definitely.
Because that's the only way to really understand the leverage being used by both Washington and Tehran right now.
Yeah, and to understand that leverage, we have to look at an incredibly compelling story right from the source. It totally sets the stage for just how high the stakes are.
It really does.
So, picture the Strait of Hormuz. It's the middle of the night. You've got an Iranian-flagged cargo ship moving through the water, attempting to breach a U.S. naval blockade.
Just pitch black out there.
Right, and suddenly the silence of the ocean is just shattered by military intervention.
Yeah, so according to reporting from U.S. Central Command, U.S. forces intercepted and actually seized that vessel overnight.
Wow.
U.S. Marines now have physical custody of the ship. And, all the diplomatic maneuvering we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
It is completely anchored by these very real, very dangerous kinetic clashes happening right out there on the water.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the language used in the broadcast to describe this event is incredibly stark.
Oh, absolutely.
We aren't talking about a ship being gently escorted out of a restricted zone. Donald Trump described the event by saying the Iranian crew refused to listen to Navy ships, so the Navy, and this is a quote, stopped them in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room.
Yeah.
I just need to let that sink in for a second. A hole in the engine room isn't just a warning shot across the bow.
No, not at all.
It is permanent, catastrophic immobilization of a massive vessel.
It's basically the ultimate display of a naval blockade's mechanical reality. I mean, a blockade is essentially an economic tourniquet, right?
Right, exactly.
It only cuts off the blood flow of trade if the threat of violence backing it up is absolute. The source material notes that over the weekend, at least 24 vessels were turned around, complying with U.S. orders.
24? That's huge.
Yeah, turning around 24 massive cargo ships in a tight waterway is a total logistical nightmare, but it proves the tourniquet is actually holding for now.
But the situation gets even more dangerous because this U.S. action happened just 24 hours after Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, fired on 2 vessels trying to pass through the strait.
Right.
And this is where I want to pause, because the term IRGC gets thrown around a lot in the news. And for you listening, it's crucial to understand that the IRGC is not just, the regular Iranian Navy.
That is such a vital distinction to make. Iran essentially has 2 militaries.
2 completely separate ones.
Yeah, exactly. The regular armed forces are there to defend the borders, but the IRGC was created after the 1979 revolution, specifically to protect the country's Islamic Republic system.
Okay, so they're more ideological.
Exactly. They are the ideological enforcers, and they answer directly to the supreme leader. So when the IRGC is the entity firing on vessels, it sends a much more political message than if, say, a standard Coast Guard vessel just fired a flare.
Wow, that changes the context completely. And the broadcast notes, those 2 vessels the IRGC fired upon were allegedly in violation of a ceasefire.
Right.
But we hear the word ceasefire and we imagine like a signed document with really clear boundaries. But in maritime conflict, a ceasefire is often this highly fragile, vaguely defined de-escalation framework.
Because the ocean doesn't have painted lines.
Right. There are no painted lines.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where the IRGC uses live ammunition to enforce their interpretation of the ceasefire, and literally a day later, the U.S. blows a hole in an engine room to enforce theirs.
What's fascinating here is the cognitive dissonance between, the bureaucratic language of international relations and the raw violence happening out on the water.
Yeah, it's such a stark contrast.
Words like maritime jurisdiction or ceasefire sound incredibly sterile. They sound like these neat legal concepts debated in air-conditioned rooms in Geneva.
Totally.
But the reality is that enforcing these concepts requires ballistics. When physical flashpoints like the Strait of Hormuz erupt, they serve as the ultimate pressure gauge for the geopolitical system.
So they're forcing the issue.
Exactly. The naval combat is designed to force the opposing side's hand, basically narrowing their options down to you either escalate the violence further or you come to the negotiating table.
But the transition from the water to the negotiating table seems completely broken right now.
Oh, completely.
I mean, the physical clashes are just the symptoms of a total breakdown of communication on land. There are looming questions about whether an Iranian delegation will even travel to Pakistan this week for direct talks with the U.S.
Yeah, that trip is very much up in the air.
And just to clarify for our listener wondering why Pakistan is the meeting spot, Pakistan shares a long, complex border with Iran, but they also rely heavily on U.S. financial aid and military cooperation.
Right, they're caught in the middle.
Yeah, they often end up acting as this uncomfortable middleman or neutral ground in these regional disputes.
And the uncertainty of that trip to Pakistan is really at the center of the diplomatic gridlock right now.
Yeah.
Iran's foreign minister held a press conference indicating they haven't actually agreed to attend these talks yet.
They haven't even agreed.
No. They stated they're currently reviewing U.S. proposals, but they heavily implied that the U.S. has shown bad faith in the ceasefire and just a total lack of seriousness in the diplomatic process.
And Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian released a statement getting straight to the heart of this gridlock, right?
He did.
He said that honoring commitments has to be the basis of meaningful dialogue. Then he cited a deep historical mistrust of U.S. government conduct, claiming that unconstructive, contradictory signals from American officials carry a really bitter message.
And his exact quote there was pretty intense.
Yeah, he said, they seek Iran's surrender.
Seek Iran's surrender is just a masterclass in strategic framing. It fundamentally redefines the nature of the talks from a negotiation between equals to a standoff with an imperial power.
But I have to jump in and push back on the logic of this entire diplomatic dance.
Okay, lay it on me.
Both sides are actively firing weapons. The IRGC shoots at ships. The U.S. Marines seize a vessel after literally blowing a hole in its engine room.
Right.
So how can Pezeshkian claim that historical mistrust is the primary barrier to getting on a plane to Pakistan?
It seems ridiculous, right?
Exactly. When bullets are literally flying in the Strait of Hormuz, complaining about contradictory signals feels like a massive stalling tactic. It's like demanding a background check on someone while you are currently in a fistfight with them.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are touching on the core mechanics of game theory in international relations.
Okay, how so?
Well, accusations of bad faith and historical mistrust actually function as highly effective diplomatic shields. When Pezeshkian uses the phrase, seek Iran's surrender, he is solving two problems at once.
Domestically and internationally.
Exactly. Domestically, he is projecting strength to the hardliners back in Tehran. He is framing any future delay as Iran holding the line against capitulation.
My read on that is it basically prevents him from looking weak to the very IRGC commanders who are currently out there shooting at ships.
It absolutely does. Furthermore, on the international stage, citing historical mistrust allows Iran to stall without technically abandoning the diplomatic track altogether.
Because if they just walk away, they look like the bad guys.
Right. If they simply refuse to negotiate, they become the sole aggressors in the eyes of international law, which risks severe global sanctions or even a unified military response.
So it's a very calculated delay.
Yes. By claiming they want to negotiate, but must delay to review proposals due to U.S. bad faith, they buy time. They literally use the kinetic reality on the water, the seizures and the blockades, as evidence to justify their hesitation on land.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Because if Iran is complaining about unconstructive, contradictory signals from American officials, we have to look directly at the explosive ultimatum delivered by Donald Trump in this broadcast.
We really do.
It completely illustrates why Iran might genuinely fear a forced surrender. I mean, traditional diplomatic language usually involves veiled threats, right? Phrases like, all options are on the table, or we will enforce our red lines.
Yeah, exactly.
It usually leaves an escape hatch for both sides.
Standard diplomatic lexicon is entirely built on ambiguity. It allows leaders to threaten consequences without locking themselves into a corner where they actually have to start a war.
But Trump completely abandoned ambiguity here.
He threw it right out the window.
He spoke to Fox News reporter Jacques Heinrich and delivered this germly blunt ultimatum. He said that if the deal that we made isn't done, he will take out their bridges and power plants.
Which is an insane escalation.
And then he took it even further, stating, and this is a quote, "They don't sign it, the whole country is going to get blown up."
This raises an important question, though. How do ultimatums of this magnitude actually function in high-stakes negotiations? We really have to analyze the psychological game being played here.
Right, because he's not speaking in code anymore.
Not at all. An extreme threat like taking out a nation's entire power grid is a deliberate attempt to shatter that bureaucratic stalling we just discussed. It's a textbook application of what political scientists call brinkmanship.
Or the madman theory, right?
Exactly, where one side tries to force the other to submit by appearing willing to do absolutely anything, no matter how catastrophic.
It's the geopolitical equivalent of a game of chicken. Imagine two cars speeding toward each other on a single-lane road. Trump's rhetoric is the equivalent of ripping his steering wheel off and throwing it out the window.
Yes, perfect analogy.
He is signaling to Iran that he physically cannot swerve, so they have to yield or everyone dies.
That analogy perfectly captures the strategy, and, it plays incredibly well to a domestic base that desires strong, uncompromising leadership. It projects total dominance.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
A huge one. The strategic flaw is that inside the negotiation room, this exact quote basically validates President Pezeshkian's claim.
Because threatening to blow up a country if they don't sign a piece of paper is the literal definition of demanding surrender.
Precisely the issue. The mechanism of an extreme ultimatum often backfires in international diplomacy because it entirely freezes the ability to compromise. Think about the Iranian leadership's position right now.
Yeah, they're in a bind.
If they fly to Pakistan and agree to a deal mere days after Trump publicly threatens to blow up their bridges and power plants, they appear totally subjugated to their populace and to their own military factions.
They look like they caved to a bully with a gun to their head.
Exactly.
The bluntness of the threat, which is supposedly meant to break the gridlock and speed things up, actually makes walking into that room in Pakistan politically suicidal for the Iranian delegation.
It creates this paradox of extreme leverage. Pushing too hard, too publicly, can actually forge an unyielding resistance. The targeted party has to dig their heels in simply to prove they possess sovereignty and cannot be terrified into submission.
So what does this all mean? We've got U.S. Marines seizing ships in the pitch black of the Strait of Hormuz. We've got diplomats refusing to get on planes to Pakistan using historical mistrust as a shield.
It's a mess.
And we've got ultimatums involving the destruction of entire national power grids. If you are listening to this and wondering how this specific localized standoff impacts the rest of the world, we have to look at the broader regional shadow.
Right, because none of this is happening in a vacuum.
Exactly.
The Fox News transcript includes reporting from Trey Yingst in Tel Aviv, which provides a really crucial, sobering reality check. This U.S.-Iran tension is thrashing around in a region already completely saturated with profound grief and active conflict.
Yeah, the broadcast notes that at the exact moment these massive threats are being hurled back and forth, it is Memorial Day for the Israeli people.
Yeah.
The nation is marking an incredibly somber moment right before their Independence Day. And the context given is just devastating. Since October 7th, nearly 1,000 Israeli soldiers have been killed in terrorist attacks or in combat.
And bringing that human toll into our analysis is vital because it explains the real-world mechanics of regional proxy wars.
Because Iran doesn't just act directly, right?
Right. Iran does not just operate within its own borders or out on the water. They fund and supply this massive complex network of proxy groups across the Middle East.
Like Hezbollah and Hamas.
Exactly. Organizations that are in direct kinetic conflict with Israel right now.
So a spark in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just stay in the Strait of Hormuz.
It never does. If the U.S. and Iran escalate to direct conflict, if bridges are actually taken out or engine rooms are continuously destroyed, Iran's immediate strategic lever is to activate those proxy groups.
Oh, wow.
A diplomatic failure between Washington and Tehran creates an immediate ripple effect that lands directly on Israel's borders. The grief experienced by the Israeli people, mourning nearly 1,000 lost soldiers, just highlights the immense fragility of this entire ecosystem.
It really anchors the abstract political rhetoric to a grim physical reality. When leaders casually throw around phrases about blowing up countries, those actions have cascading human consequences.
They absolutely do.
It makes the need for effective diplomacy, rather than just stalling tactics or, brinkmanship, an urgent matter of regional survival.
It perfectly illustrates how intertwined military action, diplomatic language, and human consequence really are. I mean, the economic tourniquet in the ocean, the empty chairs in Pakistan, and the grief in Tel Aviv, they're all symptoms of the exact same geopolitical disease.
We really have been looking at a live collision today. You have kinetic military force actively being deployed to enforce a blockade, countered by live IRGC fire.
Yeah.
You have peace talks in Pakistan trapped in this massive game of chicken. You have terrifying ultimatums meant to force a surrender, which honestly might actually be guaranteeing a stalemate.
It's a terrifying loop.
And all of it is unfolding against the backdrop of deep regional mourning that could easily be amplified by one single wrong move.
Just one miscalculation is all it takes.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on.
Meh.
We spent a lot of time unpacking President Pezeshkian's claim of deep historical mistrust being the primary barrier to peace here.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, how long does a ceasefire actually need to hold before trust can even begin to be rebuilt?
Can you even measure that in a region this volatile?
Exactly. Or, when you look at the raw mechanics of modern geopolitics, is trust even necessary if the mutual threat of destruction is scary enough? Like, does the fear of a blown-up power grid eventually do the job that trust used to do?
Does the sheer terror of an ultimatum completely replace the need for mutual respect in international relations? I think the answer to that question will likely dictate the future stability of the entire Middle East.
It really will, and we want to hear from you on this. Do you think blunt ultimatums like threatening to blow up infrastructure actually force a deal to happen by cutting through the diplomatic noise? Or do they just guarantee a fight by backing the other side into a corner?
Let us know what you think.
Yeah, drop your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, we have something really special coming up. We are doing a massive community Q&A where we analyze the wildest, most extreme negotiation tactics in history.
It's going to be such a great conversation.
You definitely do not want to miss it, so please hit that like button, share this deep dive with a friend who loves geopolitical strategy, and subscribe for more content. We'll catch you on the next one.